Well, I'm Dave Merritt, and this is
Pamela Merritt.
We're the Merritt family. When my granddad had done these pieces back in the 50s, I believe the entire collection is 14 pieces. 14 dioramas.
The dioramas, there's 14 of them here.
And I think he had installed them over a period of time over the 50s. But in any case, he had done a lot of work at the Natural History Museum in New York, and then he had opened up his own company doing exhibits similar to this, as well as full-size taxidermy and dioramas for many museums around the country. In Massachusetts, he did a lot for the Springfield Museum, and also done some work for Worcester and also Boston Science Center. Several of his works. Well, I grew up at the studio, and my education was really based at the studio. I had then gone to Los Angeles to work in the film industry for years. That's when Pam and I got together, and we then I don't know, gosh, I had done that for maybe about 10 years or so, and then Pam and I had moved back together and took the studio over in the 90s, and we worked, oh gosh, about 10 years, and it just became a little difficult to keep the studio going up in Hudson, just due to the fact that the business climate was changing. People the museums weren't really wanting these diorama type work anymore. The dinosaurs were we had done many of the dinosaurs for various museums around the country. You know, dinosaur designs were changing, theories were changing, and so we decided at that point to head back to Los Angeles and continue in the film industry. Which we did for, oh gosh, about another 25 years. So recently we moved back, and this is our first adventure back into the studio work, doing these dioramas.
So professionally, I was trained as a teacher, and when we got together, we got married, and we moved back to New York and took on the studio for that 10 years, and in the middle of that I had my son, and so when we did move back to Hollywood, I was bi-coastal for about 4 years. I took on running the studio, and so I just took our son Avery back and forth with me for about 4 years until that was too difficult to continue to do. So we kind of mothballed this aspect of our lives, and I continued with homeschooling. So I didn't teach in schools, but I taught my son. And
it's kind of, with her education experience and with what we were doing at the studio, it kind of went hand in hand.
Very much, and I thoroughly enjoyed the research aspect, and I think I totally missed my calling as a conservator because, you know, hindsight's 20/20, but I really, really enjoy the aspect of refurbishing and restoring the life back to these wonderful pieces that were done so long ago. I just love seeing, you know, bringing back the original look of the dioramas here. Even though they were enclosed, they got dusty and dirty, and it just kind of, they're still pretty to look at, but when you really get into it, they're muted, they're dull, and coming back here and doing this restoration, it just, you know, brightens them up and brings it back to as close to the original state as we can get them, and I love that. I love seeing it come back to life.
For me, it's part of my childhood. So to be able to get into these, and it brings me back to watching my father, who had worked on these a lot, and my grandfather and my uncle Paul, putting these dioramas together, and I get these little visions back at the studio when I was young, and that's kind of warming to me. So it's kind of nice to be part of that.
It must be wonderful to see your father's painting. He did a lot of the background painting.
Yeah, they're Matthew Kamlanoff did I don't know the percentage of how many he did versus what my dad had done, but over the years my dad developed a good skill at being able to do these dioramas as well. Oh, I did, sure. Yeah, many a time. I love this museum. It's local to us, and you know, to be able to come over and watch my dad, you know, do any work here, or I remember he used to take me to various museums that he was doing any installations in, including the Berkshire Museum. And I remember he took me down to West Point. He was doing an installation of showing military years ago, probably in maybe the 50s or so, or 40s, you know, in trenches, and you know, that was done. Gosh, I was probably 14 years old at the time when I experienced that. I want to go back down and see if it's still there.
So he was installing an exhibit of the past.
Yes. Yeah.
I look at things at different levels, and you know, as I do touch-ups and cleaning, I get down very low at a child's height, and I think about it and how a child might see this, as well as adults appreciating something like this. They were designed to be instruments for learning, right? And the original intent of natural history museums was to bring things to places that children might not have experienced
Children
before,
or adults.
Adults. You know, not everybody can travel around the world or go to Africa or Asia and see these animals. So I think the whole intent of the natural history movement was to preserve for future generations, and I just love that you know, Lou is a sculptor, was very much a naturalist and part of the naturalist movement, and very interested in the whole preservation and educational aspect of all of this. You know, what were the trees like? What was the climate like? What, you know, how was it different from our backyard? It's
funny, you guys are doing your restoration or renovation of the museum, and several of the crew members here have commented to us, and so as well as some of the museum staff, about being kids seeing these for the first time. So it's been 30 plus years, you know, and it's nice to hear that from people who'd experienced it. You know, it's kind of a child's first vision of the world, right? You know, I mean, how many kids can see them in the books, but you kind of, you know, and nowadays, of course, you see them in video and you see it on TV and so on, but to stand in front of it and get a dimension that it just kind of makes you feel like you're there, which is kind of cool. So,
yeah.
And it's just the aspect of it being a miniature, and you know, how do they do this? And they're little animals, and they're painted in the backgrounds, and how do they get a perspective to it? And why did they do that? And what? I mean, there's just so many questions.
Look at the grass, and look, there are leaves in there.
Yeah. They're really fun. Yeah, they're really fun. We've been here for about 3 weeks. It's taken to do all of this work on the dioramas. Some more were very dirty, others were in better shape. So, we use a variety of materials that they either have to dry, or so then we have to bounce around from one diorama to another diorama to let things dry. The paint has to dry. We use oils and acrylics, and so yeah, it's been about 3 weeks or so. And Wally, I don't know, Wally was.
Again, it was a process. We had to. There were some cracks that we had to fill, and the material, soaked in, so we had to go over it again. And then the last one was sculpting in the texture. So there were, 3 separate days of just filling cracks and sculpting.
Right. Of course, we were chasing the rain. It's been very rainy.
Yeah, you had to work around the rain.
My granddad was a very generous person, very loving. I feel that he would be very, very pleased with what he left behind. I know he was happy with his work.
He was content. He did what he loved. He loved what he did. He was very interested in, like I said before, preservation and the naturalist movement and natural arts in general. He was very interested in education and sharing.
It was an exciting time for him, really, to be, 18, 19, 20 years old and be handpicked by Carl Akeley from the American Museum, along with several other talented taxidermists and sculptors, to create the Museum of Natural History's dioramas, which is one of the most impressive collections in the world. And so for him to be part of that is very fulfilling. And I think that he felt very fulfilled when he passed, that he left such a legacy of great work that he could feel proud of.